Wavect, the Web3 software company that understands what you want.
Hi everyone, welcome at Wavect. Today is going to be a special episode because I have the amazing Mrignayni Pandey today here, which is who is a blockchain writer and consultant at her own company, if I'm not mistaken, called Unhashed. And she also formerly contributed to the well-known company MoonPay, Axon Park, and PlaneToEarn.net, and many others. And I'm also getting support today from our tech lead, Christof. Thank you for joining as well. And today we're going to talk about the super exciting and super relevant topic, copywriting the right way, especially related to Web3, because as we just discussed in our previous discussion before actually starting the podcast, there might be differences regarding that. So super curious about that too. So thank you everyone for being here. Mrig, just giving you directly the mic here. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself? You know, how is the life of a blockchain writer? Right? I would really love to know.
Yeah, sure, Kevin. Thank you so much for having me here, first of all. I see myself more as a content strategist than just a copywriter. So yes, as you correctly introduced, I'm the founder of Unhashed. We work with brands like MoonPay, Alchemy, Definity, and a lot of other companies that you must have heard of. We primarily do content strategy, end-to-end content strategy, the creation, distribution, optimization, and even something called governance of content for these companies. I come from the enterprise SaaS world, and I've moved to Web3 blockchain now. So doing some cool stuff and helping brands scale with organic content.
This is awesome. Question that I would be curious of, how did you get into the Web3 and even the writing space itself? That could be interesting.
Yeah, sure. So I was writing for this Hong Kong brand called Brand Creatives, and I was writing for data stacks with them. And I came across this opportunity, and the editor just asked me, "Hey, would you like to work on this piece? I know it's new, but I think you will be able to figure it out." I was a technical writer, so most of my time was like talking to developers, writing a lot of technical stuff. So I just started. I knew what blockchain and the space was all about. I started reading and um, just kept going down one rabbit hole after the other, and I guess I was really like, this was after me being a technical writer for so long, like this was really the next level for me, I thought. So really started writing for the space. I'm so sorry, I think I've not updated my LinkedIn for quite some time. So while I was working with Brand Creatives itself, early last year, I got this opportunity from Axon Park to write alongside. And so now I had two projects. So slowly and steadily, I started building my portfolio. And from there, partnered with my co-founder, Musharraf, who has been in the blockchain space for the last 6 years. And, together we scaled Unhashed, and now we are working with some of the best companies out there.
Wow, that's incredible. Super interesting. So just something that I'm curious about myself, because I discovered that to be super powerful, right? How did the whole, like storytelling, writing good articles, texts and everything, that basically belongs to that. How does that affect, for example, or what kind of impact can you have from that, for example?
Yeah, sure. That's a very good question, and that's a very loaded question as well. So I've worked with enterprise SaaS, being a technical writer for a long time. And when I was moving into Web3, there are some key differences, fundamental differences between the way marketing is done in Web2 versus how it's done in Web3. But the thing you mentioned about, how storytelling and what's the impact of that here in Web3, something that over the course of time I have discovered is there is no marketing, quote unquote, in Web3. There is only brand. And what I mean by that is, in Web2, there are three stakeholders, let's say. One is the company, one is the user, and one is the company, the user, and the investor. In Web2, what happens is there is the product which is marketed to users, through which investors make money, right?
Mm-hmm.
In Web3, all these three categories of people collapse into one, which is called the community. The word gets thrown around a lot, but I don't think
Yeah.
a lot of people understand what that term means. So there is the community. So what makes Web3 so powerful is network effects, right? So there are different forms of growth. Network effect is not necessarily a form of growth. It's often confused even with virality. Network effects is more of a model. If you look at the Web2 world, 70% of the value that comes in the Web2 world comes from companies that have had some network effect or the other, because the growth is so rapid. Network effects in simple terms means that every user who gets added to the network adds more value to other users in the network, while making the platform more valuable at the same time. So when you add more friends to Facebook, the platform becomes more valuable because you have more people to talk to. Plus, the platform also becomes more valuable for your friend and for you as well, because you have connections to make, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in Web2, what happens is, Facebook gets to keep all the data and everything that is created off of the platform. That's not the case in Web3, because there is community and people are owners of the network, right? um so there is no marketing, in the sense that there is no X marketing activity or Y marketing activity. It's all about designing systems where people can bring on new users, and that can further expand the community, who can again bring on more and more of that network effect and keep expanding the network. You're not pushing anything to anybody. You just like I mentioned, designing systems in a way that people can come on board and be a part of that community. So there is brand, there is not necessarily marketing.
Mm-hmm. Really love that, right? Because it actually shifts the focus from trying to sell something to someone to
Mhm.
basically how do I bring value to my community, and they
Absolutely.
create more value that you can distribute then, right? And that's incredible. That's really a super cool mind shift from companies themselves, right? Speaking of companies, how basically if I now have a Web2 company or a Web3 company whatsoever, how would you say could I start as a company brand to actually enter that kind of thinking, mindset, community building, writing? I don't know.
Yeah, again, that's a great question, Kevin, and I completely agree. I think what makes again, I'm just touching on what I mentioned earlier. What makes Web3 so powerful is, the community that I mentioned, collapsing of users, companies, and investors in one category. It's more powerful because it's also economically aligned, right? So we have referral systems in Web2. That's not necessarily needed in Web3, because that you're going to profit off of every user that gets added in the network, right? And so individuals are rewarded in Web3, but what happens is, the network as a whole gets rewarded for that activity. Like, just Bitcoin mining is such a good example of that. You give your computational power, and you get rewarded in the form of bitcoins in exchange for that, right? So you're rewarded as an individual, but you are doing something that helps the community as a whole, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I lost your question. Your
No,
question was,
that's awesome. That's super cool
that's
already.
great. Yeah. Um, how can brands get started with this
For
type of
example.
thinking?
Sure.
Yeah. So again, there are a lot of moving pieces to this. This is also a very loaded question. Um, what happens in Web2? Sorry, I come from the Web2 world, so it's easier for me to compare and then tell you, rather than just like start from
That's
scratch. So
perfect.
in Yeah, so in Web2, what happens is you can build things as you go, right? You can work on things iteratively. If something does not go well, you can go back and fix. In Web3, I think that you have to think about things end to end, because once the token is launched, everything has happened, there's really like no going back. And plus, the users you're onboarding on the system, like you have to be very careful of that. It's like you've come like with a spaceship, and you're putting down a ladder. You have to take a few people with you, and it's very important that you take the right people. Otherwise, that spaceship, you don't know where it's going to go. It might be just lost once it's gone, right? So it's very like you have to think about systems, and you have to think about things end to end. So that's one thing. There are like a lot of other moving pieces, but thinking about like from a marketing standpoint, thinking about brands, where I would start is just think about where on the spectrum of centralization you lie. If you are on like the extreme like centralized with no tokens side of things, then everything you would be doing would be very much like web 2 only. There are two bits to this. The strategy is around, one is demand generation and one is SEO. So demand generation means more of social activities, community building, and things like that. Whether it's in web 2 or in web 3, both the spaces are trying to move towards community building, which is more of doing inbound stuff versus pushing out things to people and spamming them with messages. So centralized with no tokens, there is the SEO strategy, which is more of capturing demand, and then there is demand creation, which is putting out stuff more on focusing more on brand building and like again creating a community out there. That's centralized with no tokens. And on the other side of things, decentralized with tokens, I would say think more about end to end, more focus on how can you design systems, have a good vision, a purpose for the brand, crystallize that vision down on paper, create a good white paper. Again, like it's a lot, like you design things end to end and think more in systems when you are on the decentralized with tokens side of things. I don't know if that answers the question, but like I was all over the place, I guess.
Hey, it's a discussion, so no worries. So how does that thinking basically affect let's say, the way you write posts, articles, your announcements on Discord, whatsoever?
Right. Okay. So there are 5 buckets to think about this. One is content strategy. I'll speak more in terms of, like since I do content marketing and content strategy primarily, I'll speak in those terms. So there are 5 buckets to this. One is content strategy, one is content creation, then there is distribution, optimization, and governance. So content strategy, like I mentioned, has 2 bits to this. One is SEO and one is demand generation, right? So thinking of what is the strategy that you can take up, very often for some products in web3, I mean, people are not searching for those terms, so you have to evaluate if your the keywords you're going after, or if SEO is a viable strategy for you or not, right? There are products which are which can't be for web 2 users. It's just very native to web 3. So there again, not worrying so much about SEO, and instead focusing more, like I mentioned, on brands, building out partnership, and focusing more on the communication that you'll do on the website makes more sense, right? So that is the strategy side of things. So in SEO, see if the keywords you're trying to go after make sense in your space or not. One case could be people are not searching for those terms. The other could be people are searching for those terms, but there's a lot of competition out there. In that case, in either of the 2 cases, again, you'll have to evaluate what are the resources you have at your disposal, and then think about that. The second bit is which every company does, which is demand. The creation of demand, which is more around community building, going out on Twitter, building out a community. Like it's not an either or option. Very often with most companies that I work with, you have to like find a balance between doing both of these things. So there is the strategy side of things, then there is the actual content creation. How I think about this is, again, once you have your SEO and your brand strategy in place, you're going to again create content based on that. There's a lot of social listening involved when you are doing like the brand side of things. So you have to listen to what your users want, and then create strategy from there, versus in SEO, like things are pretty much structured, and a lot of folks in Web2 already have laid out structures which you can just follow. So it's a pillar and cluster strategy. So what you do is you find out key phrases that you want to go after, and you create clusters around each of those pillars. So if we take Web3 wallets, how to connect your Web3 wallet to your website, how to sign up on MetaMask. These would be all clusters around the primary key term Web3 wallets. This will be the SEO strategy. What could be a good brand topic around like a product which is around Web3 wallets, or if that's the keyword they're trying to go after, would be how unbundling of wallets might happen in the future, as to how we need to have different wallets for different types of users that are out there. So somebody who's uh, who does a lot of NFT buying and selling should see only the things that they have purchased or the other NFT products out there in their wallet. Somebody who's taking on leveraged positions should see the status of their different the positions that they have taken in their Web3 wallets, and how in the future, for different use cases, there'll be different type of wallets. This also maps to what happened to Craigslist when we were just starting out in the Web2 world. Something like this in the brand and community side of things. I don't know how this will go. This is just something that I can think of off of the top of my head. So those two strategies on the content creation side of things. Then there is content distribution. So like all of the 5 buckets that I mentioned, they don't work separately. All of them like work together and often overlap. So then there is content distribution. So once you've created the content, think about how you're going to distribute that content at the places where your community already hangs out. So you can think about this before putting out the content, or after putting out the content. After putting out the content would be, you've put out a blog post, let's say, and you have to distribute it on Twitter. So create a thread around, what are the key takeaways from the blog, and at the end of the thread, maybe link your blog. That would be after publishing the blog. Very often when you're just starting out, you do not have a community of your own. So you could also consider things like guest posting, or like writing on other platforms. So there you're thinking about distribution first. You're thinking about what content would fit best for the audience that's there on that platform. So that's distribution. Optimization is content creation is not once done and over thing. You have to constantly keep going back, especially if you're taking an SEO strategy, to think about how can I update the existing pages that I have for the keywords that are already ranking, and reshuffle things. Also, this is for SEO. For the brand side of things in content optimization, it would be consistently putting out stuff that is trending in your space. So that is all around content optimization. Then there is content governance. So when you're putting out so much content, you need to have a workflow and process around all these things, and you have to like create your own internal buckets and curate that content very well, both internally, so that you can find that content whenever you need, or your team members can find that content. And again, there has to be like a common doc which helps everybody find out whatever content they are looking for. That's one thing. And then there is external content governance, which means that for the different use cases your product has, how are you going to segregate content that's there on the website? So think in these 5 buckets. Think about content strategy, think about content creation, think about content distribution, then the optimization, and then the governance. Okay, so yeah, this is how it looks like.
Wow, a lot of interesting things said. What I really found super interesting now is especially the distribution first approach, right? Compared to what you actually do, right? You produce content and then think, how can I distribute that somehow, right?
Yes, absolutely. And I think very often marketers who move from Web2 to Web3 find it very difficult, because it's like you have to let communities form on their own in Web3. You have to like wait and watch for some time, and then in Web2, what happens is, I've been for so long in enterprise SaaS. I mean, every day you get up, and there's a message from the CMO. Hey, what are we doing today? What are the messages we are putting out? What are the emails we are sending out? It's a lot of work. And in Web3, it's more about social listening, right? You have to listen to, what are the conversations that's happening in your communities, and kind of more respond to that, versus, think about, hey, we pushing out something, or we have to do certain type of activities to get our users to listen. It's more about seeing what is already happening, and then giving them all the resources they need to like form those closely knit communities on their own. Did that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. It was a very, very deep insight. Never thought of that.
Yeah.
So you stated networking effect and communication is key. What would you
Yes.
say is, if there is a secret or any sense to write really good text? Because I struggled when I write tests. I used to write program code, and when writing tests, I often struggle or have a writer's block. So getting stuck in there. What would you say is a secret to write easy, good text and don't get stuck, for example?
Um, that's an interesting question. I don't. So, like, I've been doing it for a while. So, just explaining the ABCDs or just the how do you start bit is a bit difficult. But I'll tell you how I think about this. Um, when you have a deadline, I don't think you ever have writer's block, lol. So that's there. You For all the topics where you're stuck writing on anything, I think the primary thing is, you don't know either enough about the subject, or you're not thinking about it enough inside of your head. You would not find any difficulty writing about your everyday routine, because you know that it's there inside of your head. So more research definitely helps. This is with all the type of writing that I do. Again, starting with a blank page is intimidating. What often happens is, when we are writing out stuff, we are trying to edit it at the same time, and we want this perfect sentence to just magically appear on the page, which never happens, right? So what you do is, when I sit down to write, I usually have 10 to 12 different tabs open on my laptop, and I just find inspiration. Research is a very important process. I like I do not like write on a topic which I have absolutely no knowledge about. If I know that I will be writing about that topic, maybe, so what I'll do is I'll research beforehand, 2 or 3 days before I'm about to sit down and write the topics, that I have some knowledge about it already, and then I can filter out information easily. So I usually have 10 to 12 different tabs open, and what I do is I pick up inspiration from different places. I already have some knowledge inside of it in my head, and then I just put it out all there. It's all very rough. I usually Sometimes I just write like 8 to 12 different pages, and it all comes down after editing to one page. So don't start with an absolute blank page. That's one thing. Find out inspirations, do a lot of research, and then write, and don't try to edit it while you're writing the piece out. Put it all out there. Like, it's all going to be very rough, but at the end, after 2 or 3 rounds of editing, it all comes out fine.
Really interesting things you just said in the beginning. There's a very known saying, basically. If you have 1 month time to do something, you need 1 month, right? If you only have 1 day, you're done tomorrow. So probably that could be an approach as well. Yeah, awesome, super interesting. Thank you for that. I think what I discover is, usually it's super hard to explain things in a way, in terms of what you should do is way more difficult, right? Because there are many things you should or can do, right? But usually it's, I think, easier to state some really important things that probably could be considered some kind of either a mistake, or let's say you waste some potential, right? Are there some things that you could add to that, or maybe that makes it easier?
I think I mixed up questions. So you were saying that you were talking about the writing, and adding a different perspective to that helps. Can you just repeat that question again?
Yeah, sure. Basically, my question is, when writing good text, right? Be it content like regularly on LinkedIn, or be it writing an article, whatsoever, there are hundreds of things you should do, right? Don't paste the links into the post itself, start with a catchy headline and things like that. But usually it's way easier to state what you shouldn't do instead of what you should do. Are there some things that come to your mind?
Yeah, very interesting question. So one or two things that come to my mind is, one is, don't write obvious stuff. So yeah, I mean, even if like everybody is pretty much regurgitating the same thing again and again, but you have to figure out a way to say the same things in a different way. Like it should not be like obvious, even if it is obvious, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what you want to say with that is, please interrupt me if it's not the case. You want to trigger people, right? If it's too obvious, then you read it, okay, and you go away.
This is something we recommend even founders do. So what really gets viral or gets picked up by a lot of people is stuff that's polarizing in one way or the other, right? And you can't really take a mid ground. You like, I know it's bad, and then things are not black and white. It's always gray very often. But like when you're writing, you have to like be polarizing in one way or the other. What I meant when I said don't be obvious is, let's say I am writing out a post on how to find business ideas. I can like, everybody is going to put out the same information about, hey, find inspiration around you, list down all your ideas, go test out a few of them, and run with whatever works, right? These are the 4 points. I can say it like this, right, with just the things that I mentioned. Or I can come out and say, um, um, things like, today, like if I was recording a YouTube video, I would say, hey friends, welcome back to my channel, and in today's video I'll tell you about my noise cancellation system to help you to help you find more business ideas. And then maybe list out the 4 things, and maybe even relate how my noise cancellation system, like every letter is related to whatever the points I'm making, or why I call this the noise cancellation system, and maybe even quote examples in all the different points that I mentioned.
Love it. Yeah, thinking systems, right? That's definitely that also relates to your governance approach that you mentioned earlier, right? Actually, the more systems you have in a good way, right, the better.
Yeah, that's a good note, like link that you made there. Yeah, like that helps in when you're thinking about content structures as well. Thinking systems, like management consultants do. Even when you're speaking out something at the start, I think I was all over the place. It would have been better if I had talked about everything in buckets. That would make things clearer and also easier for the other person to follow stuff. I think one of my good friends, to the point that we were discussing earlier, he's a developer, and he said everything in Web3 is pretty straightforward and simple. I wonder why people are trying to make it complicated. And to everyone who thinks about hey, this is so simple, why does this sound all so complicated and something novel? It's actually a way of getting people to listen. So if I just said hey, I'm going to tell you my steps or my ways on how to find business ideas, I don't know how many people would be interested, because just that. But if I say, hey, today with all of you, I'll share my noise cancellation system to help you find business ideas in less than 5 minutes or something, then it gets a lot more attention. It also sounds novel in some sense. So I wouldn't say making things sophisticated is nice, but it garners traction, if that's the right word. Okay, so yeah.
Yeah, if you are able to make people curious about your piece of content, you're fun, right? That's definitely a way to approach things. Awesome. Hey, really, thank you for sharing that. Super interesting things that you have come up here. I would say, if you have time, I would be curious in maybe 3 things that, for example, you would tell anyone or a brand or company, basically you have a lot of customers in that space, to start out with all that, with content producing, writing, and so on.
Yeah, sure. There are a lot of things actually. One is the first one is stop thinking so much about your product. Think about users first. When you're writing, when you're putting out anything, think about users first. It's more about what users can do with your product than it's about your product. So get out of that space. Super important in Web3. Web2, you can hire copywriters and all these people to fix it for you. In Web3, not really. You have community. There are people who are giving you constant feedback in Discord communities and in all the places. And like you really need to think about them first, and the community, and really, like I mentioned, listen to them. So that's one thing. The second thing I would say is, again, think about systems and think about things end to end. In Web3, if you fuck up once, then it's done. I've seen a lot
Yeah.
of projects do this mistake. So take your time to think through things. Don't run after the money. I mean, the money will come. You will, like, things will fall in place, once you are clear about, what is it that you're doing here, and what's the larger why or the purpose with which, you're doing all of this. So that's there. The third is, let me think. Mm,
No
uh,
worries.
not really. Like I said, it's not iterative. Yes, think about things end to end, not just, like in steps. Like just getting users with the token launch. You also need to have a very good strategy what's going to happen after that process. So again, think in systems. If you do not have the resources, take the time to, like, understand or get people on board in your team who can help you understand how to think in systems, and help you build those systems and think from start to finish, all together.
Wow. Hey, thank you. Super powerful. Definitely a lot of alpha here. Yeah, I would say with that, Christof, any questions left? Rick, anything
Thank
you
you.
want to
No.
let the people watching know as well? Otherwise, I would say thank you everyone for watching. Thank you, Mrig, for being here. It was really an honor, a pleasure. And yeah,
Likewise.
Wavect, the web-free software company that understands what you want.